Hello and welcome to the Skylanders Spyro's Adventure developer commentary. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the lead animator and current studio head of Toys for Bob, Paul Yan.
Spyro's Adventure started in around 2008. At the time, I was the animation lead.
And what kind of animation was that? Was it cutscenes, enemies, characters, or a mixture of everything?
Basically, anything that moves on the screen would fall on. I mean, I say that half jokingly, but the animators are in charge of characters first and foremost, and those do spill over into both gameplay and cinematics. We did have a range of like full motion video stuff that was done outside of house, so those were separate from us, but we did all the stuff in game. There's prop stuff, there's level stuff that we would animate as well. There was UI that we animated, but for the most part, we are primarily interested in characters, their personalities. Um, yeah, that's the heart of Skylanders.
So you were animating a bunch of the Skylanders, presumably.
Yes.
What's the process for animating a character like that?
Well, it starts even before the character is even made and ready to animate. We would have we'd look at concept art, and EWA would pick out a bunch of amazing drawings and share that with us and share that with designers, and we would just have a conversation about what is the most interesting and exciting character and the move sets that designers were thinking about. So it's a very organic thing. It's not like there was necessarily a production line of work that it went down, but we'd have that first conversation just to think about it. And in some cases, we would take some rough models, pre-existing assets that we had, and try to rough out some ideas and concept, because sometimes, as we're talking about it with words, it's really easy to get excited, and then you try it out on the screen, and you're like, that wasn't so great, or you surprise yourself and you find out that something that didn't sound so great is actually really exciting visually. So that's where we start to have the conversation. When the concept art gets approved and we finalize that this is going to be a toy that's really exciting, then that really enters into the stage where we can start to work on it. So that mesh will come through to the animation team. And the animation team, the riggers at the time, it was a guy named Eddie and myself. We would take that mesh and we have to set it up for motion. So rigging means you've got this mesh and you've got to add a bunch of, you call them skeleton or bones or joints. These things help provide articulation to the mesh, which is static up until this point. And then once you provide that points of articulation, you've got to add controls, because animators want to do certain things. Like you might want to stretch an arm beyond the limits of how it was originally sculpted at. So those types of controls need to be factored into it. Or if you have like weapons, that's a big thing. So the weapon needs to be able to detach. Maybe it needs to dock to the back of the backpack, but then someone grabs it with the hand, so it needs to somehow be able to constrain to the hand and then swipe. And maybe he tosses it out to the enemy, so it needs to be let go and spin in a very specific way. So all those types of things need to happen before an animator even touches the character. So once that's done, then animator gets their hands on it, and then they have a discussion with designers, because we're still feeling out what types of powers that we want to do. And there's a lot of experimentation there, where the designer will put in the mechanic for, let's say it's throwing out the sword in front of him. The animator will rough in something really quickly with just a series of poses, and we're not too worried about interpolation at that point and the smoothness of the action. We're just trying to find some really key golden poses that help sell the readability of this idea. And we play with it. Oftentimes it depends on the animator, but everyone has a different style in terms of how we block things out. For myself, it's I would probably try and do 3 or 4 key poses for an attack. It's as few as possible, so that the turnaround time for us getting something on screen and then playing with it with the controllers and moving around, moving the camera to see different angles. We want to try it out on screen as quickly and as often as possible. And I don't remember how long it would take. Every character was very, very different. It was all case by case, because some of the ideas were way wilder than others. And, like sometimes I'm trying to think back on SSA. I've got a poster in front of me that has some of the characters. So let's see, like Bash was pretty straightforward, because in our early prototypes we had a character that was going to roll like a ball. So we knew exactly what we needed to do. That was like a very straightforward one. So getting him in a pose where he was a ball and then moving him around to make sure that the contact felt right and the rumble felt right. That was all cool. And then we had like a character like, let's see. Oh, Igniter. Igniter was really fun because there was this. Obviously, he has this like fire sword, so we wanted to do crazy things with it. We wanted to scale as his power progression moved up. But then there was this idea of like essentially naked Flame Boy running around without his suit of armor, and so that was a huge technical. Like, how are we going to accomplish this, and how do we control the look of Flame, which is a dynamic thing? And there's like particles in it. There's some forms of mesh in there too. How do you make sure that you can tell that there's appendages, like he's running around? So that was a lot more complicated. That required way more back and forth between the designer, the animator, the VFX artist to make that happen. I kind of veered off course there. What was your original
No, that was fantastic. It was basically just I'd love to know about what it was like to animate from like start to finish, and you pretty much went through that. Like with you said that you do like a rough version, so there's a quick turnaround. How long does it take roughly to do the rough version?
It all depends on the animator. Like some animators will do what I just described, which is just a handful of poses in what's called stepped interpolation. So you will actually only see that pose held, and then it will pop to another pose once it changes, and then it pops again. There's some animators who they rough in the form. They only animate the pelvis and the head or the spine or something like that, and they're able to see not necessarily with full poses, but they can feel out the range of motion, the weight, just by doing it that way. So there are different styles and different approaches depending on the animator, and it's, there's no lockdown on how you should do it. And so the timing varies, and another thing that varies is the complexity of the character. So, for example, the dragons are just way more complicated than, say, Stump Smash, because there's way more points of articulation that you have to control and manage, because you've got, not only do you have 4 feet, each of the 4 feet have individual fingers, and the dragons also have wings, and the wings have, like, I'm just ballparking here, 16 to 20 points of articulation as well. If you look at like a character like Stump Smash, he's got hands with no fingers, and he's got feet with two toes on them each. So much simpler form, easier to rough things out, and it's way faster. So I'll just throw out some estimates, and my memory is a little hazy because it's been a while. But Stump Smash, like, you could knock out a really quick idea in maybe an hour or 2 hours.
Wow.
Get it on the screen. With the dragon, maybe let's try and double that time, something like that.
That's crazy how quick the turnaround is.
Yeah, so we would get the assets, and we animate in a program called Maya, and those need to get kicked out to the engine and exported, and then we build the game. We make sure that those animation are assigned in a way that the logic can call on it in the right time. So there's some coordination there that needs to happen with the designers, because they write their scripts. The scripts need to call the animation. Once it's calling the right animation and it's all hooked up, then we're good to go, because we can continue to refine and tweak the animation and just re-export and hit essentially refresh, which is, to see the game again on the screen. And we all have the game running at our desk, so we can move the arm a little bit, and we look at it in Maya and do a little preview there, and that looks good. And then we hit rebuild, play the game, and see how it reacts to button pushes, and in context with combat, and in context with the camera and stuff like that.
That's really cool. Did you have a favorite character to animate throughout the game?
Let's see. I'm looking at the poster now again. Trying to remember. Like, at some point, I feel like the way that we did things is that each animator owned a single character, and as we did polish, there was some passing around, so there was some sharing there. But I know that I started Wrecking Ball. He was really fun because he had a burp. Well, one thing to note is that he's essentially just a ball with legs, and even the legs, they're really hard to see from the perspective of the camera. most of the times. So he's really limited in his range of silhouette that he can perform. With an appendage, you can move it, in front of you and back of you. The timing of it can all vary up, and those are interesting things visually that you can play with. With Wrecking Ball, he's a ball. He's literally a ball and a mouth. But what's interesting, he's got a tongue and he warps. He's got he looks like he's made of, like he's able to be flexible. And so we really played with the cartooniness, the stretchiness, the squashiness of that, and I really enjoyed that tight constraint of, this is a really limited form. What do you do with it? So the burp was like really deformed. If you like step through the frames for that animation, it was pretty wildly distorting that original mesh. But hopefully, when you play it at the right speed, you get this sense that it's a burp that's distorted in a comical way.
So I know this is pretty much like choosing your favorite child, but what's your favorite Skylander?
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed Trigger Happy, and I think part of the reason for that is that this is a couple weeks before we had to submit. We were done with the game. We were all just focused on bug fixing. The animators had rolled off on the project because we were just focused on bug fixing, and we realized that we had not put any time towards updating our Toys for Bob logo. So when you boot up the game,
Yes.
you call those bumpers, right? There's like, you get the Activision logo, you get the Toys for Bob logo, these little like short 10 to 15 second little blips. And ours was criminally old and we hadn't updated it. And so we're like, hey, we've got some spare time. What can we do? We had like 2 weeks to just scramble and do something. And we had purchased like a fancy new 3D printer that printed out characters in color. Up until that point, early on we were doing hand sculptures, then we did some other versions, but the color print was really awesome to make. And I know Alessandro was really excited to, any chance he had to like use that thing, he's like, oh, I'll do it. So we came up with this idea of, what if we took one of Trigger Happy's animations, we integrated him with the Portal of Power, and we used that as the O in Toys for Bob. And we 3D printed every single animation frame and recreated it physically. So the concept was, we're literally animating a literal toy. So we did that. And we had, I think we printed out 60 to 80 individual 3D prints of Trigger Happy. And I still have a tray of that somewhere in my office. And that was really fun. We had to, we put it together on we set up one of our conference rooms. We just took it over. We set up all these photography lights. We crafted together this little rig where we could attach magnets to the back of the 3D print so that we could suspend it in space, because if you look at the bumper, Trigger Happy jumps up in space when he comes to life. And so he's got to float up. And so we were able to adjust that and hold that print in place. And then when he blasts off into space, there's like huge stretch frames. So one of the prints is actually like about 10 inches long, just for that one frame of him like leaving the screen. And then we had to rotoscope out the armature and any types of imperfections once we took the photo.
That's so cool.
I have fond memories of that project because it was so improvised and rushed, and sometimes those constraints get you to a really creative place. And I know a lot of times when I look at that bumper, it's probably not immediately apparent that that's physically happening in space. It almost looks like a CG comp sitting on top of a photo plate, but no, we printed out every single frame. Those are individual toys.
That's absolutely awesome. I really want to look at it back now. Just like, oh, I know, I can see it. That's so cool. Was there anything that was scrapped that was put into a later Skylanders?
The idea for giants, definitely we were scratching at that early on. And I know I'm getting fuzzy with my memory here, but I know Iway was playing with ideas for a kart or a racer, which eventually made its way into the franchise. But those, they were out of scope for that first game, and it was too complicated because we were already introducing so many new ideas.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, obviously, you are now the studio head of Toys for Bob. I assume there's a lot more responsibility now.
It's different. It's different work.
So, what does that entail exactly?
Oh, that's a good question. I should probably know the answer to this, huh?
That's
It's
fair.
very it's very different day to day, but I think at the heart of it, um, it's managing and making sure that the studio thrives culturally, that we have the resources that we need to execute on the projects that we have, and it's also paving a path for a slate of projects into the future. Those are kind of the big responsibilities, and there's a whole bunch of detail in between.
So, what are the biggest challenges that come with that?
Um, People, technology, money. There's so many variables, and there's. I think at this level of leadership level, there's more interaction with the publisher, which just means different perspectives, different personalities, and so it's more coordinating of several different perspectives and ideas and goals, and making sure that everyone's aligned. It's more of that type of wrangling. When I was an animation lead, my focus was on, hey, we've got X number of characters. They need to be finished at this amount of time. And also, they need to be at the highest quality and be as amazing as possible. So, I don't know that they're not apples to apples. They're very different challenges. One is way more focused on people, and one's way more focused on developing things that are awesome and entertaining on screen to make people happy.
And if we go back to the animation work, what was your favorite part of development?
Seeing a character come to life, that whole process, it's really satisfying. Seeing concept art or seeing the first prototype of a toy and saying, I wonder what I can do with this and make this come alive on screen. That's just a really great journey to do every single time. It just doesn't get old.
That's really cool. This is quite an out there question, I guess, but what would you say is the weirdest or funniest thing that happened during development?
Weirdest or funniest thing during development? Um, I don't know if this counts for weird, but like the Imaginators game, we did this special project where the app version of the collector's app, where you could view your collection, you were also able to create your own Skylander on it, and so that was really interesting to coordinate with this other team to recreate what was happening on the game. But there was the more interesting challenge was that a select people that were randomly drawn were able to purchase a 3D print of their character, and that is really hard. It turns out. um, so much of what we do is digital, and we take I take that for granted sometimes because there's a lot of flexibilities and hacks that we can do in the game that just aren't possible in physical space. So when you have a character that's created in software and you can scale its proportions, you can change its color, you can change its material or its sound or its VFX, or all that stuff. You can change its appendage and all that. Those are all, it's hard to do in software already, but to now assemble it as a toy, that was incredibly difficult. And we had to invent this whole pipeline of taking someone's custom invention of a character and then validate that it's able to be printed in a way where it won't fall apart, it won't break because the arm's too skinny. We had to pose it in very secure ways so that we had it was just stronger architecturally, structurally. I mean, that was really interesting. I will not forget that challenge. Weird in that it was very different.
I think everyone watching probably knows the answer to this, but what have you worked on since working on Skylanders?
So this last year we shipped Spyro, the Reignited trilogy, and that was such a joy to return back to classic Spyro. Um, Spyro was the genesis of Skylanders, but as we all know, that kind of grew beyond that one character. That was the source of the inspiration, the motivation for us to attempt to reboot that franchise right around the 2007-2008 period. But there was a whole bunch of fans of classic Spyro that felt left behind, like Skylanders ignored them. So this was a chance for us to go, no, we care about we absolutely love Spyro, the original game. So to remaster the first 3 games was just such a great thing that we could say, okay, Skylanders was a thing that was definitely inspired by Spyro, but it's different. And we want to go back to the original, and what can we do to make the original better with modern technology, modern sensibilities.
Talking about the fans who love Spyro, as you know, I absolutely adore Skylanders, and I absolutely adore Spyro. They're very different, and I love them for different reasons. But yeah, just Reignited really just blew everyone away, and yeah, just thank you so much for all your work on both franchises, because it just, yeah, they are, I mean, they are some of my favorite games of all time. I still play Trap Team fairly often. I really like Trap Team, and I adore Reignited, and I play those all the time. So just, yeah, thank you so much for all the work that everyone did for the many years that you were working on, both.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, a huge reason why we do this is because games inspire joy, and to hear that come from you, to validate that means a lot.
I guess I will ask you one final question. What advice do you have for people looking to get into the industry?
I would say that right now there is a proliferation of tools and information out on the internet, and it's a lot easier for anyone to, there's less barriers of entry now to try and build a game or to specialize in a particular craft. And so I would just say, do it, make it, do it often, get feedback, and show people the cool stuff that you make, be proud of it. And at some point, the people that you show are going to be people in the industry, and if they catch notice, maybe they'll pay you to do that forever.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much once again for agreeing to be part of this, and for sharing what you do, your expertise, and yeah, it's been an absolute honor.
My pleasure. It's great talking with you, Teal.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, share the video around. I also have a Twitch, a Twitter, and a Patreon if you would like to support me and the channel. As you can probably tell, this is a massive passion project of mine that I've been working on for quite some time, and I'm really glad that I'm able to get it out to you, and I'm really grateful for you watching the video. If you want to see more from the series or other stuff that I do on this channel, click that notification bell to be notified when I upload next. But thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.